So thank you all again for being here today, and good to have you all here for week 3. The pressure's starting to build, as we were just saying in the at the beginning there, and that's all normal. In fact, a little bit of pressure can be motivating. It can drive you to make a start on your assignments and or seek advice and assistance if you're unsure about things. But of course, if it tips over that sort of healthy stress to too much stress, then that obviously has a very detrimental effect and can make things a bit difficult to start, or we get a little bit overwhelmed. So if you're feeling like that, then always reach out, and there's lots of support available. So there's nothing wrong with asking for help if and when you need it. And on that matter, questions, comments are always welcome in this session. So do feel free to contribute in by using the chat functions, the emojis, and also turning on your mic. So all of that is welcome at any time. Okay, I'm just enabling the captions there. All right, so with that in mind, our topic this week, week 3, is looking at organisational environments, and we'll also look at our first assignment and just check a few things with that one and make sure we're on the right track following our topic from last week when we were looking at the skills needed to complete that assignment. Now, that in terms of this week's content, it's also relevant to your assignment 1.1. So we'll talk about those links there too in terms of the content. Now, looking at our plan for today, so as you can see, we're looking at the different environments of an organisation, and that includes the external environment and also the internal environment. In other words, the culture of the organisation. And as you can see there, we're also looking at the assignment preparation. So just as a way of introduction to the topic, and again, some of you may have listened to the lecture recording, some of you may have read the textbook chapters, some of you may not have. It's all okay, you're all always welcome. And in terms of the textbook chapter readings, you know, it's okay to just do a bit of a light reading, and then after the classes, do that sort of more intensive reading and taking some notes and so on. But just as a bit of an introduction, when we're looking at talking about the environments, you know, this is something obviously that managers have to be really aware of what's going on outside of the organisation. And so this is where they really are scanning and monitoring those things that may have an impact on what's going on inside the organisation. And obviously that will then in turn affect their decisions that they make based on that information. And this can have a real impact on their survival, as we saw during times of COVID, when perhaps some organisations were a little bit slow to respond to those environmental factors, the lockdowns and pivoting to online shopping, for example. So yeah, that being responsive to those changes in the environment and being quick or being adaptable to any changes is really important. And of course, with the internal environment, if you are working, then you'd be aware of how that culture of your workplace can really affect people's attitudes, their work efforts and morale. And a lot of that is, well, founded by the managers. So they're the ones that have to control that side of things and make sure that it's more of a healthy culture rather than a toxic culture. Because if people are unhappy, they're gonna leave. So so being able to manage that is really important. And of course, today we will look at the first assignment. Today's topic has a link to that that assignment. Where can I find the seminar PowerPoints? So we don't actually share the seminar PowerPoints, mainly because they are activity-based, but you are welcome to take screenshots of the seminar slides as we go along. this seminar is recorded, and you can access the seminar recording sometime tomorrow when I upload it to the unit site. So there's a few ways to find the resources. Certainly when we have additional activities, like last week we had some additional sort of worksheets that we worked from, and there you can find them on the unit site in the weekly topic folders. But yeah, in terms of the slides, we don't actually share those. You need to create subtasks for your assignments so that they're less daunting. Yeah, that's a great strategy. That's because when we talk about the learning pit when we get an assignment, at first you look at it and you're so overwhelmed, you think, I don't know where to start. I don't know what this is asking me to do. I have no idea what the topic is, and you feel like you're sinking into that big pit and there's no way out. But then slowly things start to make sense. You do a little bit of research, you talk to a few people, and you find that you can climb your way out of that. But part of being successful is, really breaking down those bigger tasks into much more manageable chunks. Great to share those suggestions. And if anyone has other suggestions too, that's really helpful. With this assignment, is there a template or do we make it ourselves? Great question. There isn't a template for 1.1, but there is a sample template that you are welcome to use for 1.2, which is the longer business report. So with assignment 1.1, it's not a report. It is only 3 tasks. And so if I just get the instructions back up again, we were looking at the rubric. So for 1.1, it is just these 3 tasks. So, if you had on one page your 500-word essay, and then on page 2, you would have your reference list of all the sources that you cited in your 500-word mini essay. And then on page 3, you'd have task 2, and that would be your draft table of contents for your business report. And then on page 4, you would have task 3, which is your draft reference list for your business report. So that's probably all you need to do. And this may just be your heading, and then have your essay, and your heading would be reference list, and then that would be your heading, and so on. Does that make sense? So, but for your report, yes, we do provide a template, but you're free to create your own template. Certainly when you're writing a report, which is due in week 8, have a look at what page is it? Page 5, and that gives you the section outline for or the different sections for your report. So title page with those sorts of details, and that's pretty standard for most of your assignments in your other units. Executive summary on one page, then on a separate page your table of contents, and it's good to keep that to one page only. And again, we've got some resources there to help with, I think Donovan may have posted in the discussion forum how to automate your table of contents. That's optional too. And you can see here the template provided in the unit site to create these is available, but this is for your 1.2 business report, not so relevant for your 1.1. Then you've got your introduction on one page, so each key section would be on a separate page. And then you've got your body of report, which is the 3 task sections. So that relates to the information on page 3. These are those 3 tasks. So 3 mini essays, if you like, of 500 words each. And just returning to the report structure. And then you'd have your conclusion and then references on a separate page. Okay, so this is for that longer report. So hopefully that answers your question there. Is a corporate governance framework the same as or similar to a competing values framework? I'm finding AGL isn't specifically listing a competing values framework. Yeah, that may be the case. So again, that might be part of your critical thinking to look at the theory of the competing values framework from the textbook and perhaps other sources, so how they've got those 4 quadrants, and then you would perhaps compare and contrast that to what's given on the AGL website. You know, is roughly the same. Maybe they have the same sorts of concepts, but they might use different terms to describe those concepts. You know, for example, today we're talking about the external environment, and our textbook refers to it as the macro environment and the micro environment, but other textbooks refer to it as the general and specific environment, or the industry environment, or the task environment. So they're talking about the same content, but they're just using different terminology. So that might be something that you, when you're looking at that corporate governance framework, you know, you might make some evaluations about that. Great, no worries, all good. And this is the benefit of asking questions, and feel free to help each other too. So that's great. Excellent. Okay, so so that's the assignment. Again, we'll come back to that and talk more about that, and as we go along in the class. All right. So, Jessica, you had a question?
Yeah, will we get feedback from 8.11? Like,
yeah, I know it's a bit confusing. 1.1.
We get feedback before we have to do the final version for the 8.12 or 8.2?
Yes, absolutely. So we have a Deakin policy that you will get feedback. Just looking at, should have some information here. I just can't remember exactly where it is. Maybe, sorry, I'm sorry for scrolling. It is written somewhere. So the policy is, I just can't find it at the moment, 15 working days. Here it is, marking and feedback. So students who submit their work by the due date will receive their marks and feedback within 15 working days of the submission date. So, so your assignment is due in 1.1 is due in week 5 and 1.2 is due in week 8. So we've got basically 3 weeks to mark it, double mark, and moderate and all those sorts of things, and publish the results. And so you've got about a week there to review your feedback and check anything that's unclear, and revise and improve your draft. So yeah, you've got about a week there to look at that feedback. But certainly we all recommend that you make a start on, once you submit 1.1, make a start on 1.2, the business report, because it is a bigger, longer assignment, and it does take a bit of time to find sources and edit and formulate your argument and those sorts of things. So make a start. Don't wait until you get your feedback is the key thing. But yeah, you will get it. But that is standard. Sometimes, you know, we were able to release marks a little bit earlier. We certainly aim to sort of do that. But 15 working days is generally the standard. And at the moment, in the enrolments in our unit this trimester, we've got, you know, over 900 students. So it's a big undertaking to get everything done. But you will definitely get it done, get your feedback by that 3-week mark. Any other questions at all while it's everyone fresh in your mind? Okay, all right. So if we have a look at just a bit of a quick review of some of the key information from this week's topic, I may have mentioned a few things. I should say too, on the subject of the assignment, last week, Sharon, our faculty liaison librarian, gave a presentation about research skills and sources for the assignment. Did anyone catch that? Is anyone able to attend live or watch the recording and perhaps be able to share something that was helpful for you? Great. Yeah, that's right. So some of us are new, some of us have a bit more experience. So yeah, it's different people who have, different skills and so on. But what is helpful, I'm just seeing where it is. I think it's in the discussion page, but it's also on the home page. But you can access it through here, and there's the Zoom slides and recording link here. So it just has some search skills like using advanced search. And so some of those different terms, she recommends different databases. And also for our assignment, just doing a bit of a comparison of academic peer-reviewed sources versus non-academic sources. So the academic sources for the theory side of your assignment, that discussion part, where you're defining and explaining the concepts, and then referring to the application of that theory to your selected organisation. So looking at the organisational website or other sources like maybe IBISWorld or whatever it might be. So there's some different things there, but certainly you can access to have a quick look at the PPT slides. But yeah, everyone's got some different experiences and so on, and so you come into it with what you're needed. But there is some a link to the library resources as well that Sharon has provided. So if you are looking for sources, there is a link there. I think it's in week 2. Actually, I'll just quickly show you. I think we went through that last week. And this has a link to some of the prepared sources that Sharon has done for you for the assignments, and suggested readings. Is that right? And you can use these or not use them. It's really up to you. You can do your own research, but it's sort of a bit of a starting point. So you can see here it's grouped under the assignment 1.1, and you've got your task information there, the different articles relating to that particular task, and these ones for your 1.2. So these sources would be useful for 1.1 when you have to do your draft reference list. So you don't actually have to read these sources at the moment, but you can put them in your reference list and in APA 7 as a plan for using them in your report. So, so just to recap, that is relating to, got a few files open. Where's the assignment one? This one here. That's relating to, sorry, scrolling up. So finding sources for task 1, but also finding sources for your draft reference list. Okay, so hopefully that's a helpful site there. Anyone else able to watch it yet or planning to? Again, yep. Let us know how you find them. All right, so let's return back to our PowerPoint slides and we'll get started looking this week at topic 3, as I said, so we'll begin. So here's our first question, and in the chat box, see how quickly you are. I might have given away the answer a little bit early in my introduction, but that's okay. What are the 2 external environments of an organisation? Turn on your mic, use the chat box, whatever is easiest and quickest. Do you remember? Yes, so external is outside of the organisation, and there are 2 types of external environments. So what are they called? Great.
Micro and micro.
Excellent. Snap, both of you at the same time. Well done. Micro and macro. Well done. And what are the components of the macro environment? What does that consist of?
There's no direct interaction So it's things like politics, laws, and general economy.
Excellent. Yes, that's right. So, and they may not directly impact them. It can be indirect, but that all organizations, all players within all industries can potentially be affected by them. So yeah, great. Well done.
Oh, and by laws, like there are some laws that would directly impact you and probably be micro, but like say when gay marriage became legal, that was kind of macro for some businesses because flower shops would get more business, say, spike in marriages in general.
Great. Yeah, great examples. Well done. All right. So looking at micro then, so this does affect players within the same industry. So what are some of the components of the micro industry? Industry regulators. That's right. So regulations, exactly, because they're specific to industries, customers, competitors, suppliers, advocacy groups. Excellent. Now, culture is included there. So this is what's being explored in 1.1, and so the culture is more the internal side of things in an organization. And so this is what's going on inside. And it's a little bit difficult as an outsider looking in to try and see what's going on with the cultural side of things, but we can get a bit of an indication by looking at what's on their website in terms of what are the things that they value, and sort of the what are they promoting in terms of those values. Looking perhaps even at their careers page and seeing the type of people that they want to come and work in their organisation. Any other sort of artifacts? Yeah, mission statements. Excellent. That, because those vision and mission statements are often set by the founders, and that really guides the direction of the organisation in terms of what is important to them and how they're going to go about achieving that. So they want people to fit in with those values. That's a great example, Jessica. So so that's the sort of thing that that we can sort of look at from an outsider looking in. But certainly when you're working there, you will have, again, a lot of things are visible and, you can see those sorts of things, but a lot of things are sort of below the surface. And if you might remember in the lecture, we use that iceberg metaphor. A lot of things are happening that we're not so conscious of, but we just sort of absorb and just do it because, that's the way we do things around here and we don't tend to question them. All right, great. Well done. So we've got a bit of an overview there. So just looking here, this is that image you'll be familiar with from the textbook. And this has those components, and this is looking at, well, can you tell, well, you just told me this is in the macro environment. So we've got that organization there, and it's, those managers are looking and checking and seeing what's going on with those interest rates and, those supply chains and what's happening with inflation and so on. So how is this, how do we link, what's the connection with, you might remember from week 1, we looked at systems theory. So can anyone explain to me, how with systems theory, what's the connection with organizations and their environment? So what do we mean by this?
It affects what inputs you can use. So if there's an economic downturn, things may become more expensive, so you have to use cheaper materials. Or there may just be natural disasters and things like that can impact what is available. So bananas, sometimes they're not available because there's been a hurricane. Well, not really a hurricane, but you know what I mean?
Cyclone.
Cyclone, yeah. I was trying to think of what happens in Queensland.
Yeah. That's right. And a couple of years ago, we had those, last year, we had those big floods, and we were paying $10 for an iceberg lettuce. I don't know if you remember that. So that's right. It has that
Now
effect.
honey's very expensive.
Oh, is it?
That's
Because
what
of
I've
what?
heard.
A
It's gone
shortage of
up.
bees or something? Climate change? Yeah. So yeah, how interesting. So that's right. And there's so many different examples, isn't it? So aren't there? So that's right. It has a big impact. And so, and this can be dependent on your organization and what you're doing. And but also, you know, labor is an input, and there's a shortage of skilled workers. And so that can be problematic if you're looking for to hire staff and fill those shifts or whatever it might be. So the point of this is that organisations are interacting with their environment all the time, and they're not, and that means that they're an open system, not a closed system. So if they were a closed system, they don't need to worry about what's going on out there because it has no impact of what's going on inside. So, but most organizations are an open system, and they do take those inputs in from their external environment, and then they transform them, whether it is people or finances or materials, and then they release those as outputs, either services and goods to customers. So this is how this is that link to system theory, that interconnectedness with an organisation and its environment. Etienne, you've said the price of wheat and wheat products are expected to rise due to the war in Ukraine. Yes, absolutely. That's right. That was in the news only, this week or last week with Russia. There was that day of stress, wasn't there? Russia and Ukraine, they had a treaty to deliver the wheat, and then Russia said no. So there was a bit tense there at the time. I think that's been resolved, but whether that has increased the price as a result of that, but it raises some uncertainty, doesn't it? It's and we talked about that too, how it's very difficult for managers to make decisions when those sorts of supply issues are so uncertain, and it's a very complex environment with a war. It's dynamic, it's changing all the time, and there's a lot of fluctuation, and that's very difficult to predict what's going to happen and make sort of mid to longer term decisions. Great examples. Any other comments or things that people want to add there?
There's also tariffs and restrictions on, I think you're not meant to buy certain things from Russia at the moment, or in general.
Yes, that's right.
And people don't want to be seen supporting Russia, so they won't buy Russian products.
Yeah, that's right. That has those flow-on effects, doesn't it? Embargoes, great. So yeah, very, very complex, isn't it? And it just has these real domino effect in all these different areas that perhaps some are predicted, but some are a little bit unpredicted as well. Your company is US based, so we can't do business with Cuba. Ah, there you go. Yes, so those restrictions and so yeah, if so as an Australian, what working for that US company, that puts restrictions on what you can and can't do as well. All right, well, I thought we might do an activity that just explores this a little bit further. And so this is looking, we've got those different factors. Now, obviously in the macro environment, there's the human and natural disaster, human-caused and natural disaster component that's missing. So I thought we'd pop you into the breakout rooms, and in your breakout group, you just focus on one factor. So, so when you go into your breakout room, make a note of your group number, because that will be the number of the environmental component that you'll be looking at. Does that make sense? So if you're breakout group number 1, you'll be looking at number 1, the economic factor. We'll give you about 10 minutes or so, and just to have a bit of a chat in your group, say hello, of course, and how you're going, and maybe have one person to share their screen so that you can have a focal point and have a bit of a chat and take notes. And what I'd like you to do is to, first of all, make sure you have a good understanding of what that factor is, and how it could potentially influence organisations in general. And we've just had some great examples there. And then the main activity, though, is to see if you can show how that factor has an impact or a potential impact on Deakin University. What would be the link there to that factor and Deakin? So see if you can find some examples to explain that. And then when we come back, have a spokesperson or two for your group, and we'll share your findings. So it's about 6:33, so we'll come back at about 6:43, so maybe 6:45. Yeah, 6:45. So about 10 minutes or so, and have a chat. Do you think that will be enough time? Everyone's gone quiet. Sounds good. Thank you for that feedback. All right, let me create the breakout rooms, and we may not need everyone to, we might have maybe 6 groups. Okay, so open up the groups there. We've got 6 groups, and see how you go. Any questions, let me know, and I'll see you at about 6:45. Great. So welcome back again, everyone. And sounds like you had some very productive conversations. So let's hear from someone from your group to share. Would anyone like to go first? We don't have to start with number 1, but would anyone like to begin first of all and let us know what your factor was and how that factor may directly or indirectly affect Deakin?
I'm happy to go first.
And
So
political
and legal trends.
Great. Thank you, Jessica. Go ahead.
So definition-wise, it's the regulations around conducting business in and between countries, such as restrictions on sourcing in the workforce.
Yes, great.
It impacts what resources can be used, including the taxes on them and the quality. So Australia has higher quality standards than some other countries, so we may not accept something that's been sourced from a different country product-wise because we don't know what the factory does.
That's a great example. Yeah.
Alongside this, there's also standards around content in media. So especially with movies, they have to edit some movies before it can be shown in other countries. So
yes.
There's laws around that.
Yep.
Regarding Deakin, it may limit what textbooks they can use and what resources they can access, since there's copyrights and certain things aren't available in other countries.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
And it can also limit the workforce, since some unis aren't recognised. So the qualification may be real and valid, but Australia doesn't accredit it. And so the person may not be able to work at Deakin.
That's a great example. Yes. That has big
that happened to a lot of my mom's co-workers. They got their bachelor in a different country.
So they've got to retrain.
Doesn't get accredited by the council.
Yes. Yep. That's a very real thing, and can have long-term and financial consequences. Yeah.
Yeah, it also influences being able to share free textbooks. A lot of the time you can't do that because of the copyright laws on them. And so you can only really release, I think, 2 chapters sometimes. That happened a lot in high school, at least.
Yes, and that's the same for if you're using the textbooks through the library. Yeah, you've got limited time to access them, but also, yeah, you can only download, I think it's up to 40 pages for each time you are able to borrow. So yeah, those restrictions are there. Lucky we've got an open source textbook in our unit. Well, that sounds like a really great discussion and some really thoughtful examples there of those different things that can impact the university. Can anyone think of anything else just while Jessica was talking there about the political, legal aspects?
Yes, I just I'm the group 4 as well. So Jessica just talking something, but I just want to add something. For political view, it's big in influence, impact. There will be the government with another government. In other words, it's a two-country conflict for some ideas, even like war recently. So there will be big impact for impact the organization, everything. If our organization is do some business like agriculture, import some waste, food from urine, so it's hard. It's hard to do that. It's supply chains is broken, and to Deakin, for example, if I know recent years as Australia government, the China government, they have argument. So for the Deakin University, they have lots of, they will be depend on the international students for the business running well. Otherwise, they will suffering the student resources. So recently, I think they really impact the Deakin University. The student not like used to be a lot of Chinese, but now it's Indian student more than Chinese student, because the Indian government with very good relationship with the Australia government, they have agreement with the student can transfer easily. So that's what I mean.
No, that's a really great discussion there, Leo. Thanks for that. And Jessica's added politics also influences funding. Yes. So yeah, just commenting on what you mentioned there, Leo. During the pandemic with the lockdowns, we had closed borders, and so that restricted a lot of students being able to attend on campus and also, come from other countries, the international students coming here because of the visa restrictions.
It was really bad when people couldn't get home too. And they didn't have any more housing because housing got shut down.
So difficult, and without that family and friendship support, yes. No, that's right. I've faced a lot of hardship. And so, yeah, and then with the changes even from China with the allowing students to come to Australia, there were a lot of difficulties. But also too, in terms of, you mentioned there, politics influencing funding. I mean, with the regulation to change the fee structure for different courses, that has had a big impact too on perhaps students at Deakin University and which courses they may enroll in or maybe withdraw from because of the price hikes in, say, doing commerce and arts rather than perhaps teaching. That fee structure has changed a lot, so that might have an influence. Thank you, Jessica and Leo. Great stuff. Would someone else like to go next in terms of your environmental factor?
I don't mind going next if you don't mind.
Thanks, Anastasia. Go ahead. So you were looking at customers.
Yeah, so it was me and Paul, we both did customers, and the definition that we came up with was an external person who buys goods or a service from a shop or business. And we both identify that it could be internal or external. The main features that we came up with are any invested stakeholder and an internal customer. We said that the way that it could affect Deakin as an impact on Deakin as well is that with social media especially, I mean, I saw Deakin pop up on my For You page on TikTok, and I was like, oh wow, like it popped up and I was like, okay, hello. And then I was like, wow, the way that they use marketing, especially with social media, is so it's so important for the customer, because that's how you get people to get involved with your business or organization. So yeah, that's pretty much it.
Great. Yes. And at the university, I guess the customers in this case are the students coming in. And as Leo mentioned, we've got international students, we've got domestic students, we've got mature age students, Indigenous students. So yeah, that whole diverse range. You keep getting Swinburne emails about enrolling. Oh no. So that comes under the competitors, doesn't it? So and yeah, being able to meet those customer demands and the changes in customers and students is really important. Great. Paul, did you want to add anything?
Yeah, just what you said there about the demands. Like we sort of spoke a lot about the idea that the customer is probably one of the most important on this list, because it really drives everything from not only marketing and product design, but also just the channels that you speak to people, the CX investment, things like that. Something with Deakin, like as fundamental as the courses that are on offer. There was one gentleman who I don't know, maybe they can put their hand up or maybe they're not here, but in week one said they were doing a Bachelor of Cybersecurity, which is not a degree that would have been around 10 or 15 years ago. And I think Deakin's, recognize that there's the gap in the market. So there's a product design change, and that all comes driven from customer demand functionally. So we talked a lot about how like everything really comes down to who is your customer, where do you contact them, and what do they need? Because that's really like, without that, any business fails.
That's a great point, Paul, and the need to always be alert to those changes in needs and wants. Otherwise, you'll go the way of the dinosaurs, and the students will go to your competitors. Yeah, and you're right. We've got the university has to deliver programs across a variety of different industries, and another example to support that. Recently, in the past few years, there's been a really strong push for work integrated learning courses. And, in the lecture, we talk about the graduate learning outcomes. So they're pushing skills that you're developing in your course, in your units, to ensure that you are graduate ready. And so that when you leave your university, you've got that, job ready skills and knowledge to walk into a competitive position. Great point. Yeah. Thank you both. Have we got another person who'd like to add to those comments or share about your factor?
I'm happy to go next.
Thanks, Ryan.
Yep.
Now, you did number 2, didn't you?
Yeah, technological factors.
Tell us about it.
So we sort of, with a good old Google search, defined it as tools and equipment that have been developed to achieve practical goals in a reproducible way. So basically, the main advantage of technology is that it can make processes more efficient and much easier for the organisation, for most organisations. And it also can create many opportunities, as can be seen with Deakin especially. Like, all of us can complete classes and seminars and watch the recordings and that online, which we might not be able to do if the technology wasn't available. At the same time, though, the technology can have its downfall as well. So like, it can, obviously with ChatGPT, it's impacted on the job market, made some jobs obsolete. So its main advantage, which is creating greater efficiency, can be a disadvantage in a way as well. And probably another negative of technology is that even though it's allowed people to work at home, it has sort of detracted on that social connection that we have just by working with other people in person.
That's a really interesting point there. Lots of interesting points, and certainly the Chat GPT, we're going to have a look at that a little bit more in more detail in a moment. But yeah, that has implications across so many different areas, replacing jobs, but also, you know, as point of mind, front of mind for us is, you know, academic integrity issues and things like that too. So yeah, looking at your courses though, you know, by the time you graduate, will you be, you know, we're just talking about being job ready, but what will the future be like? It's just evolving and changing so quickly. So yeah, the university has to be responsive to that. Very much so. And yeah, the social connection side of things is so important, is it? Because, you know, if so many positions and tasks can be automated, you know, what's left is what are needed are those critical human interpersonal skills. So yeah, that can be a drawback of these sorts of technological devices, like as we saw in lockdown, how hard it was to be socially isolated.
Yeah, probably just one thing I forgot to mention. I think we always talk about how the technology has a negative impact on workers, but probably another aspect is that it can have a negative impact on customers as well. I think a good example of this is with a lot of the bank branch closures at the moment. Even though it means that the systems are becoming more efficient with online banking, the branch closures can have a detrimental impact on, especially like some of the older customers and that, who really need to go into the physical branches and all that.
Yeah, that's right. That's a great point. And I think Jessica's just added that too, a similar sort of idea of limiting people without access or an understanding of technology. Poor grandma is the example. Yes, and yeah, that's right. It does raise issues of equity. And of course, a lot of technology, if you're managing an organization to keep up with those updates and those innovations, it can be very expensive. So yeah, there can be some restrictions on access to having those tools and using them as effectively as you could possibly use them for. So yeah, some really great points. So, and again, it's constantly changing and evolving, and so you do have to keep up to date with that. Otherwise you will get left behind, but that can be very costly. But yeah, as we can see here too with our Zoom, you know, we've got our live sort of transcript happening there. We've got the audio function, we've got the chat function, we've got a few different things. You can play it back with the transcription available on the recording. The PowerPoint slides, we have notifications through AI about how to make them more accessible for students. And yeah, those sorts of innovations, yeah, that need to be mindful of them and try and make it as equitable as possible. Really, really good points there. All right, have anyone else like to share your thoughts about anything we've discussed so far, or provide your example?
I'm happy to go next.
Thank you, Carla. And you did the
economic
one.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. So we discussed basically what economics means and how it relates to the market and the prices within the market. And obviously what's going on at the moment with inflation, the prices influence the market, and therefore the supply and demand fluctuates with that market. So that was pretty much the definition and defining economics. But in relation to how it would affect Deakin, we had a few different points. Point number one was salary and wage expectation. And if they're possibly not being met with the inflation, teachers may look to get alternative jobs. They may hire less skilled teachers as it might be cheaper for them to employ and pay. rising cost of living could reduce the demand of studying because they can't, like students might not be able to work enough to actually pay for their overheads. Therefore, yeah, would study over a longer period or may not study at all. There could be like a demand for high demand for online study, because a lot of regional students might decide just to stay at home living with parents due to the high housing crisis and the cost of living. And the last point we had was Deakin could possibly lose potential students due to competitive prices at other institutions.
A really thorough overview there, Carla. Great
Yeah.
stuff. And yeah, I mean, you would maybe some of you relate to many of those examples that Carla and Etienne raised there. And yeah, the cost of living crisis, it's having a real impact, isn't it, on students and maybe their choices of courses. And you can see a bit of an overlap there with the political legal, those sorts of fees, the HECS and HELP fees are set by the government. And so, you know, that has an impact on perhaps student enrollments or changing courses or reluctance to perhaps even start a course because of that other cost issues that's going on outside. Maybe even part-time, you know, doing internships as well. You know, a lot of those internships are unpaid. Can students afford to do that? So yeah, has a big effect. Or students may miss classes because they have to work to meet those costs and the ongoing sort of results that may have. Great, a really good overview, and yeah, it's a bit troubling, isn't it? Would anyone else, have we covered everybody? I'm just sort of checking, have we missed a group? Instead of writing essays, I'm now going to do a research binge on altruistic career choices in the state of the economy. Good on you. We need more people like that. Anyone else like to share your discussion points? Gone quiet, gone shy. I'm reluctant to sort of ask people, but if you're not willing to, but all right then. Well, thank you all for those contributions. And again, if you're a little bit shy about turning on the microphone, you feel free to post your points in the chat box. That's another way, and that's all good. So contribute in the way that you're comfortable with, and hopefully have more confidence to use the mic later on. But I certainly thank those students who shared your ideas. Great discussion. We could see how those sort of general factors can have a real immediate and effect on our everyday life here at Deakin, and whether directly or indirectly. And those decisions then that managers have to make to plan and perhaps mitigate some of those potential problems, but also to see perhaps potential opportunities as well. So not everything is negative. That negative could be turned into an advantage. Okay, so we talked about the Chat GPT. So we're going to do an activity in a minute about looking at that and the impact that it has on our studies and how we operate as a university in terms of academic integrity and things like, and those sorts of things. But just a quick review in the lead up to that about the assignment. So just checking that everyone's clear about those requirements. Chat box or microphone, what are the 3 tasks for a 1.1? What do you have to do? What's the first task? A 500-word mini essay, that's exactly right. And then the second task is, what's the topic for the 500-word essay? Do you remember?
Is it the competing values framework?
Yes, it is. That's right. So you'll be looking at the theory of that, defining and explaining that, and then looking at it as it applies to your organization. Fantastic. And in your essay, what do you need to include? For example, the sources. There are 3 types of sources you need to refer to. What are they?
A peer-reviewed article.
Yes. That's one. Yep, in the chat box 2, at least textbook and yes, so at least to get a pass, at least 2 sources, but to get a credit or above 3. So peer-reviewed academic article, textbook, and organizational source. And remember, you can cite them more than once, so you have multiple citations, but at least 3 sources in your reference list. And when you're using information from those sources, you need to have as well a paraphrase with citation and also a direct quote. So that's where you're using the exact words. So again, a bit of a checklist to follow there for how you use that source information. Okay, great. And you mentioned there in the chat too, you need to, for task 2, you're doing a draft table of contents. How do you know what headings to include in your table of contents? Where will you look for guidance? Business guide, page 5. Great. Yes, that's a great suggestion. That essay format, the report format guide with all those section headings, that will give you a good indication there of what to include. And also on page, there's another page you should look at for the body of the report, those headings. What headings will you know to include for the body of the report? So you'll need to look at the 3 tasks for the business report. So I'll just get it up. So we're looking at the table of contents and, oh, hang on. Just get rid of that. The Zoom functions, here we go. So you'll need to look at what page is this? Page 3, because these are the 3 tasks that you'll be including in the body of the report. So you'll need to have some headings that are based on strategic objectives, for example. And then the strategic objectives of your organization. And then secondly, corporate social responsibility. That would be another main heading, and then you'd have some subsections about the theory and your organization. And management role. So team leader role and management skills needed. And Deacon Will experiences. So they'll be your subsections. Okay, so these are the main headings, and then you'd have to work out some subheadings for those 3 tasks. Okay, and if you remember in week 2 in the lecture slides, we looked at there was a sample table of contents. So that's a good one to have a look at, just to sort of get a visual for how do I put this together. Any questions about that one? But that, that page 5 with the introduction, main headings and subheadings for the body, conclusion and reference list, that's the main one. And you need reference lists. How many reference lists in assignment 1.1? 2, exactly right. So you need a reference list for your 500-word essay, and you need a draft reference list for the sources you plan to use for your business report. So you'll have at least 3 sources in your 500-word essay reference list: textbook, peer-reviewed journal article, organizational source, and you need to have textbook and organizational source for the draft reference list, plus at least 1 academic journal article per task. So at least 3 academic journal articles plus organizational source and textbook for the draft reference list. Okay, so remember, I'm just going to go back to the instructions again. So for the task 3 here, so you need 1 or more academic journal articles for each of those 3 tasks. So textbook is 1, at least 3 journal articles, and at least 1 organizational source. So minimum of 5 for your draft reference list. All good? That makes sense? Any questions, anyone? Okay. Any questions, of course, let us know, and happy to help. All right. So now that we're hopefully pretty confident, give me a thumbs up if you are in the chat box. One of the technological factors that we were looking at, and you raised there, I think it was Paul. Thanks, Q. That's great feedback. Appreciate that, and will. So one of those technological influences is, of course, ChatGPT. So I just want to talk about that now. And I've got an example. Well, first of all, everyone is familiar with ChatGPT. You know what it is, and maybe you have even tried it. All good there. And it's all increasing, so and evolving, and there's more and more different types of generative AI happening each day, it seems. So this is, of course, an example. Well, this is an AI. It's only from December last year, so it's not even a year old. And of course, we can pop in prompts, and it comes through. And it's become, as more people put prompts in, it's becoming more sophisticated and more tailored, I guess, for what our purpose is. So now the university's policy, does anyone know, can you use ChatGPT for your assignments?
Yes.
How will you use it? In what way?
You can use it, but just for like a guidance, and you can't, just copy and paste like things.
Yeah, exactly right. So it might be to give you a bit of a prompt to get started on a topic, or you might use it like you would with Wikipedia, just to sort of have a bit of a general overview. What is this about? Or, how can I get started? But you would need to go beyond that for to really sort of get a better result. What are some of the drawbacks that you think maybe, to reframe a question for understanding? Exactly right. Any drawbacks to using ChatGPT that you're aware of?
You don't know how valid the sources are.
And why is that?
I don't think a AI can really understand like how valid a source is. I don't think they understand, like, if there's financial backing, that makes it a bit iffy. It just can't consider certain factors.
That's a great point, and supported by other people in the chat box there. It's not accurate information. It can produce incorrect information. Information can be biased or inaccurate. So that seems to be a fatal flaw, doesn't it? So, and if we look at how it works, it's able to sort of synthesize open source information that's on the web. And of course, as we know, there's so much information on the web, and it can be good, but it can also be bad. It can be incorrect, or it can be misinformed, or There can be disinformation, so deliberately trying to mislead people. And as you've pointed out there, it can be biased. We don't know what the agenda is or what their, prejudices are or whatever. So it's just scanning what's available online, and it lacks that critical function that you mentioned there. So that's a really good point. So this is where the key skill that you are developing in your coursework to be able to question the information and to think critically about, what is this source? How is this supported? Where's the evidence? And do some general fact checking before you rely on using that for your assignments. So yeah, great points. And it's great that you're all across those sorts of limitations. Again, you're okay to use it, but just to use it mindfully and to be mindful of those perhaps restrictions or limitations that it does have. Now I've got a sample here that one of our tutors, he used a prompt for a previous assignment 1.1 task 1 question. And so you can see that at the top there, briefly summarize the components of an organization's external business environment, then identify and evaluate the potential impact on any 2 sociocultural factors that may affect Deakin University. So 2 that, it's a topic that we just looked at. And there's the answer. I'll just give you a couple of minutes or a few minutes. Let me know in the chat, give me a thumbs up when you've read it, and just have a bit of a skim read over the response. And it'd be great to get your feedback. What do you think? If you were in my position as a lecturer marking this, what sort of feedback would you give the AI? I'm just going to put myself on mute and let me know when you're ready when you've read it and got some ideas. There's some great comments coming through. Odd paragraph structure. It combines the first 2.
Oh no, I meant they should
First
combine
2.
the first 2 because one's just a sentence, like a single sentence.
Yeah, that's right. So that's right. A paragraph needs to be longer than one sentence. So yeah, in terms of meeting our requirement for DEAR and, that definition, explanation, application, relate, analysis, doesn't really sort of follow that. Yeah. Pretty rudimentary, says Paul. The ideas aren't bad, it just doesn't explore the ideas in any depth. That's another really pertinent observation. It's quite superficial. And yeah, you got some other students who agree with that. It doesn't give specific examples, says Henry. Spot on. And actually the examples aren't entirely accurate. And that goes back to Paul's earlier comment that it has been known to make up some sources, and Ryan's information can be biased or inaccurate. Daniel, that's a really good point. I'm going to come back to that one. Yeah, so if we're looking at, the example of Deakin shifting to technology, it's not entirely accurate because Deakin has had a long history of being an online education provider, unlike a lot of other universities. And so, and when we moved to online learning, it didn't have to do a lot of drastic overhauls. It was fairly smooth because we had that infrastructure. We had qualified teachers who were used to teaching and operating in that online setting. So, so these examples, and again, too, it doesn't relate to the most current examples, like it doesn't mention our alignment to Indigenous peoples. So remember, we're making a bigger effort to acknowledge the First Nations people with our in the beginning of each lecture. So it doesn't really mention that. We've got a Pro Vice Chancellor in Indigenous people. So again, it's sort of not as current as it could be. It doesn't really evaluate. That's right. So that critical thinking function is missing. It presents the information in a general way, but it doesn't really analyze it or evaluate it. That's right. What does this mean? Is it good? Does it work? Is it effective? Could they be doing more? So that evaluative function is missing. Great observations. Good analysis on your parts there to make all these points. And Daniel, they're going back to your point there, no evidence or in-text referencing. Exactly right. It's missing. So, so it doesn't tell us where it has collated this source information from. And obviously, if this was presented for our assignment, it wouldn't do well because we need those in-text citations and end-text reference lists to show where those ideas come from, to support and provide evidence, and for the reader to evaluate themselves the reliability and credibility of that source information in presenting your discussion. Great points. Any further comments? So, again, the key thing here, it is a tool. It's a really useful. What mark did it get? It got a fail. So because there is no citations, it's very, very difficult to pass anything if it doesn't have that support through the APA referencing. So that includes in-text citations and that end-text reference list. It's great you're thinking like a teacher. Now, I've just shared with you in the chat box too a couple of Deakin University guides to using ChatGPT, and one of those is the referencing site. I'll just get that up on the screen for you as well, because this is, again, Deakin's being responsive to these changes, and they have updated their referencing guide since we got this first information in, I think it was March, so the beginning of trimester 1, and I've looking at it here. It is changed. It has changed again. So so this is, again, we are having to respond as we learn more and use it more. So this is in the APA 7 guide, and I'll share this link with you. I think I may have, but I'll just share it again. So you'll be familiar with this. So under other sources, and there's artificial intelligence here. So this just gives you some information about how to use it, and how to, if you do use it, how to have a citation for it, and also how to have an end-text reference for it in your reference list. There's also, again, there's things like at AI at Deakin, we got an announcement today on email saying that there's Microsoft 365 Copilot. That's going to be another AI tool that's going to be released soon. And there's Microsoft Bing Chat. So you have access to that in your Edge browser. So again, it's a rapidly evolving sort of space. All right, so just to wrap this side of the topic up, and a reminder too about getting advice for your assignment there. So, and I know many of you are planning to make a start on your assignment this week. So looking at reaching out if needed. These are all new skills for many of you. Some of you have more experience in these sorts of understanding assignments, breaking them down and referencing and researching and so on. But if they are new skills, then there's a lot of resources and support available, and just to reach out and get that support as needed. So I'll just, again, don't want to, well, I will just add all these links to the chat box there, and you can make a note as needed. So one of them is the Smart Thinking tool, and this is an external service that the university has access to. It is an AI tool, and you can submit your drafts and get some feedback there. So I think it does take, the first submission is about 24 hours from what I've been told, but if you then upload another draft of that same assignment, it might take a little bit longer. So just factor that into your planning for your assignments. And if you do need some specific assistance outside of the Zoom classrooms or the lecture, you can email our tutor, Andrew, and he will answer your questions one-on-one, or set up a Zoom meeting and have a one-on-one consultation. But ideally, it's great if all the questions can be posted to the unit site discussion forums, and that way everyone can benefit from the questions and answers. And don't be shy about asking questions. If you have a question, it's guaranteed at least 5 or 10 other people would have the same question, so everyone helps. Anything there, any comments or that people have about the assignment before we move on? Either the instructions or anything else, or understanding the task?
I just had a question, if that's okay.
Of course.
So I've just been a little bit confused with the question. So obviously we have to talk about the competing values framework. And then do we also need to discuss the external and internal environments that could affect those? Is that what we need to do?
Okay, let's get the instructions up. So with the first task there, so if we break it down, so briefly summarize the components of an organization's competing values framework. And so that's the first part. And so this is, if you like, the definition and explanation of what is the competing values framework in general. And so this is where you would use the textbook chapter there. So that's where you would get your definitions from. And quite likely as well, you would refer to an academic journal article that helps you to explain perhaps, why that is important for organizations to be mindful of, or to use, or to be aware of. Okay, because it's unlikely that you're going to find a journal article about your organization. So this is where you're talking about this concept in general terms.
Yeah.
Great. And then in the application side of things, you're looking at your organization and you're looking at where they fit in that framework. And so then you are evaluating. So that's the first part. So you're looking at those concepts in that framework and saying, okay, well, based on this evidence that I found on their website or their annual report or whatever it is, then I believe that they are aligned in this way. And then the next part is to evaluate. If that's their position, then you've got to make a critical evaluation about how well that position helps them to respond to the external environment. So they're those macro components, most likely, that might directly or indirectly, or it could be the micro, because, for example, it could be how they may be responsive to, competitors and customers. So that's where they might have to be innovative and flexible. And so, respond quickly. So it could be the micro environmental factors. It just depends on what you find. Okay, so you're looking at, it's kind of like a funnel shape, if you like, in terms of your writing. So you're starting out fairly broad, and in terms of how this applies in general, and then you're looking at your organization specifically. And
thank you. That's really helped breaking it down like that to understand.
Does make sense?
Yeah, no, that's really good. Thank you.
Oh, good. Excellent. So this will be based on your evaluation, based on their positioning. So what is meant exactly by 2023 external environment? Is it referring to some of the factors we explained earlier? That's correct. Yes. So remember, in your group activity, you looked at the economic factors, you looked at customers, competitors, suppliers, political, legal components. They're those factors that you can draw on and use to support your evaluation. So obviously in 500 words, so that's total, but really when you're looking at your organization, that might be 200 or 250 words or 300 words, depending on how you break it up. Again, we don't want to be prescriptive and tell you exactly how you balance that information. But yeah, you've got limited words is my point. So you've got to perhaps be a little bit selective about which external environmental factors you focus on in your evaluation. So if you say, okay, well, in the competing values framework, they are aligned in this sector where they're quite inflexible, they're slower to respond, and they like their processes and methods and, very, fixed in their ways, then that may leave them a little bit open to perhaps, setbacks when they're operating in a very dynamic, fast-changing environment, when, interest rates are changing, the economic factor, or customers are sort of going elsewhere, or, shopping around for the best prices and things like that. So what are they doing to make sure that they're staying up to date? So they might have to perhaps be a little bit more innovative in ways to attract and retain their customers, or, compete with their other organizations in their specific industry. Does that help? So that's all good. Oh, great. Okay, very good. So so looking at the theory in general, textbook, academic journal article or two, and then what's happening in your organization. How would you, identify how they fit into that framework? Which sort of quadrants are they more aligned with, and to provide some examples to support your position, and then that evaluation part. Are they well positioned to respond and compete, or whatever it might be? And you'd cite organizational sources there. Okay. Any other questions about the assignment? Well, maybe we've got a few more minutes, so let's just have a quick look at, I'll just return back to our PowerPoint slides, because the last topic is looking at the culture side of things. And so with our understanding of culture, remember, this is what's happening inside the organization. And, part of that is perhaps reflecting on your own experiences. And just very quickly, I know we've only got 10 minutes, but what is your understanding of culture? what is your understanding of, say, a healthy culture or a toxic culture? And as managers, you know, what can they do to support a healthy culture? Anyone like to share your experiences or thoughts about that side of things? And then we'll have a quick look at the framework itself. But just as a introduction to that, what is meant by culture? The way we do things. Great, Q. That's right. And again, the way that we speak to each other, the way that professional dress, the way that people are structured in the organization, collaborative or siloed in offices. Workplaces have official and actual cultures. These are the widely held values and beliefs. Fantastic. Yeah. So there's those conscious written artifacts of this is what's important to us and this is what we believe in and so on. But yeah, then there's those unconscious ones, and that's where we have to be careful of, because we all have unconscious biases. So making sure that that's we're aware of those sorts of things and supporting positive things. How different behaviors are tolerated, incentivized, encouraged. That's a great example too. You know, is it acceptable to, you know, arrive at work in the morning and just be grumpy and not say good morning to people, or the opposite, to be friendly? How are you? How are you going? Those sorts of things are part of the culture. To have those informal chats, or just to be focused on the work and those sorts of things. Great. And again, it comes back to some of the things we sort of just take on board and don't question. And it's only when we go maybe to a new workplace that we realize, oh, they do things a bit differently here. We didn't do that in my old workplace. And you can question, well, why did we do it like that in my old place? And gee, you know, I feel so much happier and confident and can be my authentic self in this new place. What is it about this new place that makes me feel, you know, being able to put my best foot forward and put in a bit more effort, be motivated? And it does come down to that culture side of things. Jessica, you may be trying to encourage being high achieving, but create a toxic competitive environment. That's a great point. Yes. And so that links into that framework and those different areas there. So if you that sales environment, that is an example there. Which quadrant would that be more aligned with? Very competitive, the market one. That's right. So if the organization is very strongly results orientated, that can lead to a very, you know, winner takes all or dog eat dog sort of competitive atmosphere that can sort of lead to burnout, or people just not collaborating and working together, which is the opposite of the clan one there, where it is much more collaborative, focusing on networking, working together to achieve things. And again, too, one might be more short-term orientated, and the other much more sustainable and long-term orientated. So it's just about trying to, and these are in conflict with each other, there's that tension. So it's just trying to create that balance between those competing quadrants that sort of can get a better result. And likewise with the adhocracy. So this is one where they're really valuing innovation, very entrepreneurial. So with that, you think creative, they're flexible, you know, they're the problem solvers, they come up with ideas. And that's the opposite to the hierarchy, which is much more stable and perhaps a bit slower moving. And, you know, you think of perhaps that much more risk averse, because perhaps the consequences might be higher. Like if you're a pilot, you can't be too innovative or, you know, risk taking, because there are serious consequences. But depending on the project that you're working on, or, you know, the nature of the business, you might need that adhocracy style to begin with, but then you might need that hierarchical style to sort of come in midway through the project to make sure that processes are in place, that systems are in order so that it can sort of have that longevity and maybe develop that one good idea into something great, rather than just having all these really lots of good ideas, but fizzing out and not really going anywhere. So this is where organizations need to have that sort of balance between those competing quadrants, if you like. Anyone had a look at your organization, or maybe you might relate this to your own organization, where if you are working your company and relate to any of these areas. So is it generally that companies stick to one of these frameworks at a time, or is it a characteristic of a successful business if you strike a balance in between? That's a great question, Eddie. And would anyone like to sort of respond to that? Different in different organizations. It probably ranges between times and departments. Yeah, so that's right. I think you're both right there. So, and that's a really good question that you've asked there. So if you have a look at your company's website, you might have a look at their value statement, or, their culture page, this is who we are. And you might sort of see, or like even on their careers page, if you are, an innovative, creative person, if you like to, do something different every day, then you would fit right in here. So look at the language that's presented on their website, how they speak about themselves, the type of people that they regard as successful, who are the heroes in that organization, and you'll sort of start to get a bit of a feel about what they value and what's important. And some organizations, some industries will be more aligned with one area more than another. So, for example, a government department is more likely to be more in the hierarchical structure, where they like those systems and places. Yeah, there we go, Brittany. You've just jumped in there. We're aligned. Snap. Your job is a government role and more hierarchical structure, but I think we also promote a clan culture. That's great. So yeah, look at the turnaround, the attrition rate. If people stay there for a long time and they work in teams, they work across departments and divisions, so they have those cross-functional relationships. Yeah, that's very much a clan style, where it's very participative. People feel they have input. So yeah, you can have that sort of combination. What is Deakin culture? That's a great question. Well, we are a large bureaucratic organization. We do have that hierarchical structure, of course, because we hire thousands of people. And, we are heavily regulated, as we talked about before. So we have to meet certain requirements. There are lots of rules and processes that we have to follow for accreditation and so on. But we also have to have an entrepreneurial spirit. We have to innovate, and so that we remain competitive. So it's which one's dominant? Probably more the hierarchy one. But there are elements, and again, depending on different parts of the university, that perhaps have that adhocracy. And then, within, for example, in our unit management, we are a team who worked together for many years. So we have that sort of clan group, if you like, where we support and mentor and guide each other. So there might be sort of smaller divisions that have that clan approach, but that bigger area, there's probably more the hierarchy that's dominant. Great question. And that's just my interpretation at the moment. But yeah, so when you're looking at your organization, these are some of the things that you might have a look at and see the language and that they use to describe themselves, and see what they value in terms of the qualities that they promote in their organisation, and you might get a bit of a feel for that. Remember, Again, when you're writing though, you've got to have more than just a feel or an instinct about it. You've got to have some examples to support that, and that will come from the website, or it might come from, doing a bit of a media search for articles about maybe the senior managers have sort of said things or promoted things, maybe in the annual report, where the direction that they're going in and what they're doing. Remember, we need to relate it to 2023. All right, well, we're just almost out of time. Are there any other questions or any other comments that you'd like to share or add from anything we've discussed so far? Has that helped provide a little bit of understanding about not only the tasks for the assignment, but also the content side of what you need to write about? Is everyone feeling fairly in a good place about that? Great. Thank you for that feedback. I'm really pleased. Again, too, if you find after the class you start working, but you've got to start, more clear now, you didn't know where to start before. That's fantastic. So again, as you start to, you might get stuck, reach out and let us know how you're going. So this week, of course, continue to keep up the good work on thinking about and planning your assignment. Keep that momentum going, and maybe start by doing the fairly straightforward mechanical task like that table of contents. Remember to have a look at the week 2 lecture slides for that sample, and the instructions, of course, for the business report to give you an idea. Have a look at the library presentation and that list of suggested resources to make a start, and then reviewing that framework and your company's website to start thinking about how they fit in with that framework. And of course, any questions are always welcome. Let us know how you're going. Well, I'll stop the recording there, and thank you everyone for coming along and being so active. Again, your contributions, questions, comments, examples, they really make a big difference in how these sessions go and how helpful they are. So I really appreciate that. All right, have a good night, everyone, and enjoy the rest of your week.